Yes.
Welcome to In the Green Room. I'm Kinga.
And I'm Chet.
I'm Richard.
And I'm Graeme Rankine.
Welcome back in the green room.
Welcome back. We are excited to have you on the show and tell us what the title is today, Graeme.
Well, I'm going to attribute this to Chet, who I think we used a title, something like Get Going on the Rest of Your Life. And I've stuck with that. And I like that. I've actually used it in class.
Oh,
Really?
cool.
I love
Yeah,
that.
so-
Get
Wow.
going
Going
with the rest of your life.
Part 2.
Part 2, yes. We did talk about it on my first visit. We talked about some finance and maybe some things that young people could think about. And,
Because you're the guru, can you
Well-
tell us who you are?
Let's talk about what some old people can do about
yeah.
But no, really, can you give us your background?
Yeah, sure.
please?
So, so I'm Graeme Rankine. I taught at Thunderbird School of Global Management, which is now part of ASU.
a very prestigious institution.
One of the
it-
best in the world.
Once I left, it got a lot more prestigious. But anyway, so I taught there for many years.
Many years. How many years?
25.
25 years.
So I did a PhD in finance at the University of Washington. Taught at Rice University in Houston,
Yeah.
University of Arizona, and then
What would you do at
Ton-
University of Arizona? Because we love your U of A.
Same thing. Taught accounting and finance courses. You know, on mostly MBA undergrad.
Is that what brought you to Arizona originally?
It was actually.
Yeah.
U of A was my first job after finishing the PhD. So, and then my wife got transferred, so that's why I ended up in at Rice University. So I was there for a while.
What was your favorite school to teach at?
Great question.
Well, Rice University students were really pretty different. You couldn't get a business degree there. You could only get what's called managerial studies.
Oh.
So most of the people took accounting. I guess I developed a reputation. So a lot of people took this accounting class as kind of like a sort of a filler. So I had physics majors, music majors.
Interesting.
How fun.
Yeah, I had a music guy who had written music, released CDs. You know, I think these were more classical type things. And a physics guy who had 3 patents.
Oh, very cool.
So pretty eclectic,
Diverse.
very diverse group of people, and really smart. In fact, when you took a job at Rice, the introductory talk by the president, to all the new coming faculty is, look, these people come in really smart. Don't damage them.
That's good advice.
So
That's funny.
So
Don't make dullards out
yeah,
of it.
that's right. So most of the students were way smarter than the faculty. So don't damage them.
And how did you get so smart? You were a surfer in Australia.
Yes.
Oh, what is there something that being a surfer is not being smart?
Well,
Some kind of layabout?
No, I know. I think surfers are brilliant.
yes,
actually.
I grew up
They're
surfing.
enjoying the ocean. That's my favorite thing.
I grew up surfing because I grew up in a town called Surfers Paradise,
That's a good name.
which is basically a beach resort. My house was right on the beach, so I had to surf every morning before and after school. So it was a pretty good
Dream
life.
come true.
That was all pretty good. Home life was pretty rough. Not.
But you had a mentor that was a
But
neighbor.
I did have a mentor, next door neighbor, who was, pretty cool guy. Showed, he's an retired engineer. Showed me a lot of things, and I think that helped me sort of overcome some of this home life. It was like
Which sounds a bit dysfunctional, yes.
it was pretty dysfunctional. So this was like a kind of my home away from home, much as surfing was. When
Indeed.
Your escape.
it was my escape. I'd get out on the board and spend all day out there, and then I could sort of take the rough parts when I got home.
Yeah.
But I was too exhausted from surfing to pay much attention
That
to
is
it.
so
How did you
valuable.
overcome
Wow.
that and then decide I want to be self-driven, because you didn't have parents that were, encouraging you to do what you're doing now, and you were so. How did this happen?
I honestly don't know, but I remember at a pretty young age kind of thinking, I'm in a deep shithole, and the only guy who's going to get me out of this is me. So I'm going to have to work hard. I got a job at 11 and worked in a grocery store, saved money, did all those kind of things.
You were always saving your money.
Always saving.
Saving.
I sort of somewhat lived on it. If I wanted any, little luxuries, that was kind of the spending money. I got school uniforms for Christmas presents. It was that kind of place.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that, I got to work hard. I got to get a job. I got to make money at an early age. So I made enough money to cover my first year of university. I went to the cheapest university I could find, which was in Canberra. It turned out it was probably the best university.
How far away from home was that?
About 1,000 miles.
Oh, okay, good.
So it was in the federal
Yeah.
capital, Canberra.
Yeah.
But who told you I need to go to university? Like, what was it? The mentor?
Yes, he suggested university is probably pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
No one in my family had been to university. My brother was, kind of doing.
Is surfing still a getaway for you or no?
Well, I'm getting, actually, I'll tell you one thing. When I started surfing, which was, I was 8, surfboards were 9 feet 7.
Yeah.
They were huge.
Yep.
I could barely
Like
struggle.
skis. Yeah.
Yeah, I could barely struggle to get this thing down to the beach. So a few years later, they became 6-foot boards and they were really light. Honestly, I began to not be really good at these because you really had to get up quickly. These 9'7" planks, you could paddle and it had enough momentum you could take all day to get up.
Yeah.
And so I kind of began to end it, I think, and then I went away to university at 16. So
And then you got serious about your academics and
Yes.
making money.
yeah, exactly. So I had enough money to cover my first year in accommodation, and I won a scholarship at the end of my first year. So that kind of helped me through. So it was a challenge, but I kind of got excited, and then my interest in travel and overseas. My first job, actually, I went with a professor, and I went to the London Business School in London.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably where I got an interest in, I studied accounting and finance, but a real interest because there were some really well-known researchers in the field at the London Business School. So that's when I thought, wow, this is kind of an interesting area. Maybe I could do this. Maybe I'd be interested in doing this. So that's kind of how, and then in this area you need a PhD, so ultimately I went to the University of Washington.
So from Australia, you went to England,
And
from
then
England to Washington.
Yeah, exactly.
And now you're focused on just finance, and that's what you're gonna.
Yeah, so
Focus on.
at Thunderbird,
Mhm.
it was a school that needed to generate cash, and the way it did it was through corporate programs for executives.
Yeah.
And we'd often be doing programs in places like Mexico or Czech Republic or France or all over the world. So I got traveling, and
you would go to these countries and cities to lecture.
to teach
To
teach a program. Typical thing was I'd have a colleague who taught strategy, another person who taught leadership, and I did kind of the finance. So they were essentially programs of, when someone's kind of moving up in the organization, and maybe they have a technical background, they're an engineer, they're going to have a leadership role, so they need to know something about, leadership and motivation, but they also need to know something about the finances of the organization. How do we run this business unit better, and so the terminology. So that's a typical program that we're taught.
What are some of the basics that you're teaching everybody about? Money.
Yes.
What's important? What if we can write it down? What are the 5 most important things we need to do with money?
Well, in these programs, it was often, how do people in a company understand their own financials?
Mm-hmm.
Now, most people would see their financials, but they were Greek, and the accountants used to explain it, but it was, very difficult to understand. So essentially, I'd come in and say, here's what you need to know about your company's financials. How much profit do you make? How much revenue is there? Where's the cash coming from? What are you spending your cash on? Where might you be wasting it? Where could you be, using it, deploying it in better ways, etc.
This is all pretty much business finance 101.
Yeah,
right?
just 101.
Yeah.
And most people, even though they're in the organization, they haven't done that much. So that was really what I've done most of. And then, more sort of later in life, I began thinking, what do young people sort of need to know? So I began thinking about, kind of the stock market and invest, thinking of my own life. I had a very long run view. 11, I realized I was going to need to, get to university, get some sort of job, try and make it in the world. So,
and you have, it's really remarkable.
You're
most people's hero. I mean, what you've done,
well,
and all on your own.
Well, thank you. Many people do this, and many people sort of overcome those challenges.
But many people might do it, but they're also not going all over the world teaching people how to do it. I mean, that's
yeah, and
you're the hero.
So, well, it's been a privilege actually. I don't know about a hero, but a privilege. So you might remember on the first show, one of the things I teach, actually I just got back from teaching an MBA program in finance in Vienna. And I really like to, some of it's not all about the stock market.
No, you're doing this independently now, not as
exactly.
Thunderbird, yeah.
Exactly. So one of the things I like to spend a bit of time is, how do we make this practical for you? What should you be thinking about? Mm-hmm. Now, remember in Europe, people get pensions, and so they're they pay high.
Still get pensions in Europe?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
They do.
I know.
So we focus on what can they do if they put some savings aside, and we sort of spent some time in the first show talking about two kind of key kind of ideas. One is, if you're young and you put some money aside, doesn't have to be huge amounts, it'll grow over time, compound interest, over 30 years. So one example would be if you could find 10,000 a year, just put that aside and put it in something making 6 to 7% a year. By the end of 30 years, if you did that every year for 30 years, you'd have about 739,000.
That's a lot.
Now, I know 10,000 is a lot of money each year. So, if you just did 1,000.
So how much is that a month?
Well, that's...
that should be like this to you.
Yeah. Well, that's 1,000 a month, I'd say. Less than
Less than 1,000 a month.
900 a month.
Yes.
So, again, it doesn't matter so much how much you put aside. The point is that even if it's small, it does compound if you leave it in. So that was the first idea. And the second idea was, what do you put it in? And
that's important.
Yeah, and I think some people, if you really want to spend time studying individual stocks and prepared to do your homework, then you could buy and sell different stocks. I mean, people got into Bitcoin and all of those things. Now, I've always believed that I didn't, when I was working, I didn't have that much time to spend on it, so I basically invested in an index fund and just put the money and left it there. And that was because it was easy. I was busy doing other stuff, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'd recommend, unless you really want to spend time, kind of studying it. And some people do. I mean, I do some of this, individual stocks, just because it's fun.
Well, something that you mentioned many times is that you bought a house that was kind of in the slummy area instead of paying rent somewhere, and then you got a roommate or two that was helping you pay this mortgage, and it ended up, you tell the story.
So when I started the PhD program, I arrived in America with $3,000, and for some crazy reason, I thought I needed to buy a house with $3,000. Now, it was desperate times in Seattle, and I know we talk about high interest rates now, but back then, to get a mortgage was 20%. The inflation rate was 13%. Now, I knew I couldn't, as a guy who just got off a boat, in America, I had, basically, no income other than what the university was going to pay me. So I found some desperate seller who was willing to finance the other $47,000. So basically, I assumed a loan and then essentially made payments to this personal guy. Now, he was desperate. I was in a ghetto area. I didn't know it at the time. Pretty naive. There were crack houses up and down the street. People were killed. It was pretty rough. It's called the Central District in Seattle. Now, I remember a real estate PhD who was a few years ahead said, this is going to take off. And I think it'll be 3 to 5 years.
It was.
Well, it was
Maybe
a little longer. It was more
longer,
like
yeah.
10 years.
Yeah.
And then it did take off. And
Really?
It
Yeah.
really did.
Oh, yeah.
And I was basically lucky because when I finished the program and I wanted to sell this house, I would have had to sell it for almost nothing because Boeing was in trouble in Seattle.
Again.
So I thought, oh, gee, I don't want to, so I'm going to rent this out. So I rented it out, and then, given a long horizon, Seattle took off. So
You sure
that,
did.
so I think there's a couple of points here.
Do you still own this place?
No, I didn't. I don't. I kept it for, something like 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Would you end up selling it for?
And it truly was a dump. I once took my children over to see it when they were kids, and we drove over to look at it, and my kids were saying, "Dad, you didn't really live here, did you? This is awful."
Well, this is before the neighborhood
Yeah,
transition.
this is before the neighborhood took over. Dad, this is awful. And I said, yes, and kids, sometimes you start modest and meager. And
That was smart, though. That was a smart thing to do.
And I said it was very risky because, as I say, 80% of my income went into this house. But I did get a roommate, and as I say, Seattle ultimately took off, but not. But you had to have a long run view. So
you made good money on this place.
So I made some money. We sold it, et cetera, et cetera. So so that's what I would say to young people. You got to have a long run view of life. You got to be figuring out what do you want to do, and part of it. I mean, I am not money driven, but I do believe that money helps you kind of do the things you want to do, and even if it's giving it away or living modestly or whatever, it's that you want your basics covered, and I think today is a kind of a stressful time for people. When you ask young people, can you what's your biggest worry, and they'll say, we don't think we can buy a house. You will never be able to afford to buy a house. And Phoenix used to be a cheap area, and it's a lot more expensive.
Rent for rent, too.
Rent, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I started off pretty modest. But believe me, this wouldn't be my ideal home, my Seattle place. But it was a way to get in.
Yeah.
And
It was smart because nobody was telling you to do that.
No. And
You figured that out on your own.
But again, it was a really modest, basic, kind of beginning. But I thought,
And now you live in the nicest neighborhood you could ever imagine.
well,
so.
it's yes, but I still lead a pretty simple life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're all, I think all the data shows that young people are stressed out, they're worried about things, and I think that there's a few things that have concerned that. The pandemic was a crisis for most people. They got separated from friends and family. I mean, we do seem to be out of that now, but mental health.
Yeah.
So what can people do?
Yeah.
What can people do to de-stress and bring joy and spread joy?
Day drinking.
Cheers.
Yes,
Cheers. Cheers to this French wine. What is this we're drinking? Richard?
Okay, let me say a few words about this. This is a Bordeaux
Mm.
from France. It's called Excellium. I love the name. I
I
love the
love it.
label.
Because we're excelling.
And I found that it's a 2016, so it's really got some age on it. Now this is a Bordeaux Superior, it's called Grand Vin de Bordeaux Superior, which is a kind of unclassified Bordeaux, so you don't know exactly where it comes from, left bank, right bank, whatever. But I found this at Trader Joe's for $10.99. Thank you. And then I looked it up. Online, and it's got a lot of acclaim.
What does it say?
Well, you
And
know,
that's a good value.
This is
we're
a
talking about money.
website called
Yeah,
Vivino, which is a very popular wine called Vivino. Medium to full body with soft flavors of cherry, prune, fig, coffee, and almond on the palate. Dry, sophisticated, and elegant. Pairs well with, so this
What
is
does it pair with?
well, a vegan mushroom soup for one thing, but
I don't taste that.
so at this price, and I've noticed lately that Trader Joe's has this amazing influx of Bordeaux wines, some with Trader Joe's label on it. And this I've just noticed today when I ran in there quickly before the show, and I said, well, $10.99, 2016. First of all, the fact that it was a 2016 has some bottle age for $10.99. I said, hell, we got to try this.
Yes.
So what would this be if you bought it at the winery?
No, there is no winery.
Oh, okay.
It's not a kind of place you would go to a winery and buy it.
So you can't go to France in Bordeaux and
Well, I'm
buy
sure they
it?
may sell it in France, but not probably at the winery per se.
Okay.
I'm sure it's a big operation that makes many different wines. But again, the reason
It's outstanding.
The reason I like French wines in general is their wine laws are a lot more stringent, and there's a lot less crazy, crappy
Toxins
additives that they add to their wine. So
More organic.
I mean, this is
Pretty good.
It's
very
cheers.
tasty,
Let's
Cheers.
let's
so it's it's
let's go on with the rest of our lives.
It's some combination of Cabernet and Merlot, basically, and highly drinkable.
Well,
Anyway.
would you advise people to be more frugal with their spending on wine well, really, and tipping? We talked about that earlier.
You're gonna have some luxuries in life. I think that that's part of the getting through and the stress. But I think you can look at what you spend money on. I had a friend who used to come to work and he'd have a Starbucks every day, 5 days a week. And I would never say anything, but I guess you might say, well, do you need a Starbucks every day, or would one or two be good enough? And if you thought about
cut back where you can.
cut
back where you can.
And it's basically just don't default to the habit. Sort of say, I like my Starbucks, but do I need to have one every day for 360?
Well, if you're making $500,000 a year, so what? If you're making $60,000 a year, that makes a difference.
Exactly. And so I think that if you want to save for the long term, then I'm not a billionaire and never going to become a billionaire.
Well, but I think you splurge on travels.
Yeah, so that's
you travel more than anybody I know.
Now I do it pretty frugally. I'm always looking for deals, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So,
you're going next week to Switzerland.
Yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But
okay.
But so I think if you can save some, on, let's say, you don't need as much. Maybe you don't need to replace your sneakers. You could, there's lots of places you could probably cut back a bit. And
take a comfort Uber instead of a black Uber.
Oh yes, exactly. And put that aside.
Katie, you wouldn't. Really?
I actually like taking comfort.
But
They're new cars.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to say was we talked a little bit about, kind of the long run. And I think, young people, all people, during the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, lots of, when the market really tanked, lots of people sold everything and never got back in. And I think that happened during the pandemic. So I looked up a couple of statistics and why panic isn't a strategy, especially with the stock market. And first of all, I looked up, if the pandemic was, basically March of 2020. So I looked up, how did the stock market do from the beginning of January the 1st, 2020 to now? So this is before the pandemic, sort of was official. And that was, then the S&P 500's gone up 10.5%. So the markets over that period, those couple of months, have gone up 10%. Now, if you'd bought after the panic had set in, the pandemic had set in, March 31st to 2020, in other words, the crap had hit the fan, so to speak, market was down, but if you'd held it through now, it's 15.3%.
Wow.
Now, if you'd held it, all the way down and not panicked, and the market bottomed in October 10, 2020, if you if you'd ridden that out and not sold, and you had held it from that point to now, it went up 44%.
Wow.
So
Wow.
the basic idea is that
So let's say you had $100,000 in there.
well, you'd now have 144,000.
Wow. That's a lot.
Versus so no
Doing
one's
nothing,
no
just
one's
having-
saying so. That's yet more evidence that the panic isn't a good idea. When the market craters, I wouldn't necessarily bail out or don't sell out completely. Just like when the market goes up, maybe you don't bail right in completely. I mean,
But what if it goes way up? Aren't you better off selling and then putting it in something else?
well, it depends on your horizon. If you're going to be there for 30 years, you don't sell. I didn't sell. I just left it there.
Yeah, if you're taking a long-term approach.
You got a long-term approach.
Okay, so
You're not
let's
trying to
say-
time. You're not trying to time. I mean, many professionals sometimes are good at getting in and out. They get out, they get in at the bottom and out at the top.
Yeah, that's ideal.
It's
Yeah,
but
people do that.
really,
People do
honestly, very few money managers do that consistently.
No.
So,
So
that's
what if you take it out at that top, and then you go buy one of those fixer-uppers like you did?
well, But the question is, what's the top? You never know what's the
Yeah.
top. Are we at a top now? So I guess panic isn't a good strategy for investing in the market. I think we are subject to a huge amount of stress, and I've sort of been reading what's called Stoic philosophy, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert here, but one of the key things that Stoics believe in is, a lot of what happens to you, you do not control.
Stoic philosophy.
Stoic.
Stoic
This goes
philosophy.
back
Okay.
The
thousands of years.
Yeah,
Okay.
the famous Stoic emperor of the Roman
Marcus
Republic was
Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius, and he wrote a book on Stoic philosophy.
Yeah.
And essentially it's saying, figure out what you control, and that's all you want to be kind of thinking about. So a lot of stuff happens, and you have to somehow get beyond that. And I would say, that social media is a big contributor to why people feel stressed.
Absolutely.
And so I listened to a talk once about a lady who, I guess she was a psychologist, and she ran an experiment with people who could they essentially ignore their social media, get off the, Facebook or whatever it was.
Or TikTok.
Or TikTok, whatever. And a lot of people said it was just too difficult. But there were quite a number of people who said, we did stay off it, and we're going to stay off it.
Yeah.
And so,
But a lot of people that are advertising on the social media for their business, that's different.
yes, that's
Now, if you're sitting there on there and you're, scrolling and
who likes
looking,
me, and
and you're just focusing on that, that's totally
yeah,
what you're talking about.
What you're talking
That's
about is
nonsense.
using it as a tool. It's an advertising. It's running your
If you're
business.
using it for business, that's different.
That's
Yes.
completely different. But if you're getting stressed out, and with the
Oh, nobody commented. Oh,
Yes,
they
all
didn't.
that
They didn't
stuff.
like my dress, or That's
if
ridiculous.
you get on your deathbed, are you going to say, "I wish I'd spent more time on on social media"? I don't think most people are
Dang, I
going.
missed out.
But you're gonna say, I wish I went on more
What's
hikes.
it called?
yeah,
I wish I traveled
FOMO,
more.
fear of missing out.
Exactly.
That's a big dynamic there.
And most people aren't going to say, "I wished I'd worked longer in my life or harder." They're going to basically say, "I wish I had more time
Yeah, more experiences.
and more
Well, especially
experiences."
the ones that worked really hard. I said they
or drank more wine. Could you pour some more?
they say I wish I would have spent more time with my kids. I missed a lot.
Yes, exactly.
I love that you say that, because we just did a show, was that 2 weeks ago? With Ava Maurice.
Yeah, we talked about
And
that.
she had a pivotal moment where she realized that she did not want to do the same job anymore, because even though she was making a ton of money
Yes.
and traveling all over the world, she had missed her child's, they won in a talent show or something like that.
Yes.
And she missed that. And that day when she was on the phone, found out her son had won, she said, that's it, I can't do this job anymore.
Yes. Wow.
And so she changed her whole career, and she's now a relationship expert.
Well, and that can't have been easy, because you walk away from the gravy train and start at the bottom, perhaps. Or
And she did that. We listened to that show with Ava Maurice.
One question I have
Spiritual
is,
counselor.
because of how bad inflation is getting, do you think it's smart for people to invest in like other stuff like gold, or maybe like foreign markets or something, foreign companies or something like that? Because I also heard that there's like a coalition of countries that are like trying to like ban using the US dollar in them now. Have you heard about that too? Like there's like a bunch of countries that are basically trying to sink the US dollar now.
Well, I think,
That's
China
been
would
going
like
on for a long time.
Yeah,
And would
it's getting
like
worse.
the renminbi to become a reserve currency, so people could not just rely on the dollar. They've been working on that for a while. It hasn't sort of happened. As to gold, I think gold is a good hedge against catastrophic events.
Yeah.
If and I think gold prices certainly went up during the financial crisis, because and
It's so stable.
it's not so much that it's stable, but let's put it this way: if everything really goes south, people go for something that is safe,
Tangible.
It has scarcity.
and scarcity, and gold is it.
Yeah.
That's why people move out of the stock market during these crises and into bonds, U.S. government bonds, because they're sort of safe. So gold and bonds are kind of some of the same thing, but I wouldn't suggest you have more than 10% of your portfolio in gold, because
Where do you keep it?
well, you can literally get gold bars, and you can have them. I had a friend who was pretty worried about kind of inflation, etc., and he had gold in a vault in Singapore.
There you go.
And the idea was, if things really got bad, he could fly to Singapore, grab his gold, and that'd be safe.
And then what?
And then what?
Go to your island.
Walk around with this big bag.
So
Go to we're buy a car. Here's a gold bar.
yeah, exactly. So I think I think
Currency.
all of these things, in
Diamonds would be
moderation
easier
is
to
probably
carry.
a good idea.
Right.
So, so as far as stress goes, and kind of connecting your idea of kind of the family, I once read a book, actually 3 books, by a guy who, his name was Bernard Olivier, and he retired at 63. I guess his wife had passed away, his daughters had grown up, and he decided and he was a journalist, he decided to do something big, so he walked from Istanbul to Xi'an in China.
Wow.
7,500 miles.
Bit of a
Oh
trek,
my
isn't
gosh.
Went full Forrest Gump mode.
Now he didn't do the whole 7,500 in one stretch. He did it over, because you got snow, and he did it over 3 years, and it was inspirational. So I thought, I wouldn't mind trying something like that. And I'm retired, so what could I do? So that was when I did Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah.
And
how long ago was this?
And so that was in 22.
Okay.
And so it's a wall built by the Emperor Hadrian. In fact, I happened to do it. It was built in, 122 AD. And so it was the 1900 anniversary. And so it basically, it's 90 miles, and you stop along the way. I met lots of really interesting people.
Sure.
And it's pretty and I stopped at bed and breakfasts and pubs, and that's where I spent the night.
And remind people, where is Hadrian's Wall?
It's
What
right-
country?
Oh, it's right on the border
go.
of Scotland and England.
Thank you.
And essentially the Emperor Hadrian built it to keep the nasty Scots out, because they'd be skirmishing, etc. So ultimately it didn't work, but Anyway, so that was kind of the first one.
That's so wild. It's been there
Cheers
for
to his first
1900 years.
1900 years.
Cheers
That's
to your
crazy
first
to
wine.
think about.
Cheers, cheers.
That's crazy.
First
Yeah,
wine.
history, man.
And so, yes,
That's real
It's
actually,
like 50 generations.
there is a lot of history there, and in fact, there is they've done a lot of archaeology, and there are Roman ruins. People have sandals, and people have written kind of letters or received letters.
All over Great Britain. I remember the first time I was in London back in the late 80s. And there in the town, in city of London,
Yes.
the city of London, there's Roman ruins. And
Yes,
you're like,
yes.
holy shit.
Yeah, exactly.
That gives you some perspective.
It's been there a long time.
Yeah.
What is the biggest challenge of doing a long distance walk or journey like that? Is it more of a mental challenge or physical? Like, was there more like blisters or stuff like
Great
that
question.
that cropped up, or is it more like daunting as a mental aspect of how far you have to go?
Well, I think I did it alone. I don't know anyone that would have wanted to do that. So
I thought your son enjoys these kind of
Well,
walks.
but he was working, so he
Okay.
couldn't do that. So, so I think for me, well, I was trained, so I physically I was up for it, but I think the mental is the tough part. And I've always been a person that sort of worried about what could go wrong, and so I
With
kinda-
what? With what?
Well, I mean, could my phone break? Could I fall down and break a leg?
Or those could both happen simultaneously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the mind,
So a little bit of a worry wart.
a worry wart. So this is the monkey mind, and so
Yeah, exactly.
I sort of decided that I was going to use this as a way to sort of overcome that, and I thought, I've and basically when you leave your accommodation that morning to late in the afternoon when you get into the next
This
place.
does require a fair amount of planning.
Yeah. Now I
Yes.
did have to, plan it. I booked these places in advance, which, if you book it in advance, you're pretty much, kind of geared to do that particular thing. You can't say, oh, I think I'll just stay here the night because you booked the place further down. So I think that, I'd done all the things that I could to get rid of the risk. And so I thought I've got to focus on, being in the moment, being present.
Exactly.
And so I'm going to enjoy the incredible countryside and the people that I bump into. And there were loads of people, all, young people, old people,
And from all over the world.
for all over the world.
Yeah.
And
Have you kept in touch with any of these people? Do you exchange numbers and?
No, that'd seem
Ever?
a little odd, kind of, oh, can I have your phone number? I only just met you 3 minutes ago.
Well, we did that on
Yeah,
a
yeah. So,
the first time.
so I think,
Look, we're friends because we exchange numbers.
well, but we spent a bit more than 3 minutes,
That's true.
on the
it was
trail.
numerous texts we ran into each other. That's true.
So I think,
That's true.
Local hiking.
you
yes.
could do it with friends. And the big one where people often do it in groups is the famous Camino Santiago.
Yeah.
And that's from the Pyrenees all the way over
And
to
that's
the
600 miles.
yeah, exactly. And there are so it
I
goes
know
from
people have done that. Yeah.
But whether you're doing it with hiking or going, some people do this in the ocean and they try to swim. Like my dad would try to swim from one island to the other in Hawaii, and he would do that. And there were other people that did it
yes.
with him. People, whether it's swimming or it's
It's a
going to
personal-
music festivals.
It's a personal challenge.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're going to have to gear yourself up to sort of get this done. And, especially if it's a, kind of tough challenge. So walking 500 miles, you're staying in these, what we call albergues, which are little pilgrim hostels, which are pretty basic. They charge you 12 euros. They're bunk beds. If you want, they'll buy you, give you breakfast. You meet lots of people there.
Do you
Yeah.
lock it?
No. You're in a big room with bunk beds.
How scary.
It's a dormitory.
Wait a minute. Wait, you don't know the people?
No, they're
No.
just pilgrims like
Like
you.
a hostel.
You're in a hostel. They're
Wow,
pilgrims.
you're brave.
They're working. Well, honestly,
This
if
is
you
Europe,
were,
Wow.
sweetheart. It's not like here.
and
okay?
honestly, if you wanted to do, damage to someone, you're probably not going to book yourself into a pilgrim hostel. I mean, most people are there because they're also the same situation, enjoying the experience.
of a walk.
Of a walk. So, when you sit down to have that communal breakfast or whatever, you're probably going to engage with people. What are they doing? How are they doing it? Why are they doing it? It's really cool.
Oh, I love people, and I meet people all the time. That's what I do, but I think if
I stayed in a hostel once. And I woke up to someone else's fart, and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna do this again.
Yeah, that was.
I was like, if I'm paying someone, and it was
and the snoring.
Let's remember where that is. We might have to scratch that out.
What do you mean? It's funny.
There are
funny.
It was at 40.
It's funny.
A friend of
You were
mine
laughing.
here, did the Camino, a big part, not the whole thing, but it did like 200 miles or something, and they stayed in some, very nice places.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Okay, I could do it that way.
Yeah, you could do
I
it
could
that
do it that way.
Yeah.
If I could walk every day and
Well, to
stay
me,
at a
it's about
5-star.
privacy. I don't even have to be in a 5-star place. Like, I'm fine with like a 3-star place, but when I'm asleep, I just like to have that privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like for showers and bathrooms, like sharing a bathroom, like I'd rather just have my own. But staying in a hostel was fun for meeting people, without a doubt.
Well,
You've
and
done
part of
that.
it is
You've done
cool.
that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I stayed there at a hostel in San Diego over the 4th of July a few years ago. It was like this party hostel in Pacific
wow.
Beach.
Yeah.
But it was fun. But the waking up to the fart
Except
was
for
the
the
only
farting,
bad part.
right?
So
Yeah.
yes, I personally prefer my privacy. So, so that was like a little personal challenge. This is not my cup of tea normally, but
Oh, okay. So you
I'm
did it for
going
a
to
challenge.
need to adjust.
Well, yeah, and that's what I did.
Oh, okay.
I definitely was trying to get our group to stay in like hotels or Airbnbs where we'd all have our own room, and they all wanted to stay at the hostel. So I basically went with them to go with the flow with the group, and it was a personal challenge for me as well. I had fun, but it was a learning experience that I would definitely prefer a hotel.
Yes, exactly.
That's interesting.
If
That's,
you can, some people can't. Some
Yeah,
people
no,
have no
well,
choice, but
exactly.
they still want to travel.
Well,
Some
the
people-
hostel I stayed at was like still over 100 a night.
Yes.
It wasn't.
What?
Yeah. That
Yeah.
party one
What?
at Pacific Beach. Well, it was also over the 4th of July
100
weekend.
a night.
Yeah.
And yours are
Including
12 a
farts.
night.
Yeah.
Well, these are
farts were thrown in
Cheers.
for free.
Where's your guitar? Let's sing a song.
in
I didn't bring it. A fart song?
in
Okay,
North-
let's end this part stuff.
It's
No
your
more.
fault.
That's the hostel's fault.
Okay. All
The
right.
fart scarred me.
So in
From
northern
40 to
Spain,
42
that
out.
these they're geared up for this. This is for
Sure.
poor, people who they can't stay in rich and fancy hotels or
Yeah.
don't want to.
Yeah.
They want to be like a real sort of Camino experience. So so let me just sort of mention the big one for me. So my son works in Czech Republic, and he was going to start an MBA in Switzerland. So he called up, this was last August. He said, Dad, I got 2 weeks. Do you want to do a Camino?
Yeah.
So I said, well, 2 weeks, we can't do the biggie, all the way over to Compostela. So I said, but there is one that's in northern Spain. It's called the Camino Primitivo.
Primitivo.
And that means original. So this is basically a pilgrimage that started in the 9th century.
Yep.
And so I said, yeah, that sounds good. And he said, but it's pretty remote. So we started looking into this. Very mountainous. And we stayed in, not every time did we stay in these albergues, but essentially I got to spend 2 weeks with my son. And it was an incredible experience. And we both agree
I love it.
that we'll never forget that as long as we live. And everyone leads busy lives and all that sort of stuff. So we had to plan it together. So there's personally I get some enjoyment out of that. Now I had to pay for everything, so
But he planned it. That's amazing.
Well, yes, he did. Had a few ideas on that sort of stuff, and I said, look, I'll pay for it. No problem there. And so you get to enjoy the experience of planning it out well before you do it. That's kind of cool, if you
That's
like
cool.
that. Now, if you didn't want to do it, some people had their bags moved. There are baggage services.
Yeah,
You
there's
can do
different
that.
levels of experience,
Yeah.
depending on what you're comfortable with.
So we just went with backpacks with a change of clothes, that rain gear, that kind of stuff. So then you get to do it together, and and this is pretty. I mean, some of the days were pretty long and tough.
So can you just do like maybe a 5-mile walk every day.
Sure, you
Then
just
go stay at your 5-star resort. Go have your 5-star meal.
If you want.
Well, it's not the same. It's not a pilgrimage.
And go rent a
A pilgrimage is about a journey.
and go rent a convertible Porsche and go around all those beautiful streets in Europe.
That's
what
not
I
at
do.
the same thing.
yeah.
No.
I understand that it's two different things.
No, because you can still walk every
Well,
day.
No, a journey from one place to another and walking around the same area every day is not the same thing.
Well, you might be able to on the main Camino, but these were teeny towns.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
there was
the
no
main Camino
5-star
you can't.
hotels. Honestly, if you found a 2-star hotel, you were lucky. It's
But
really,
you can find a nice hotel.
yeah,
And what
we
about a
sta-
nice meal? I
No.
want a nice meal.
and we did stay mostly in hotels, not these.
You did
albergues.
mostly. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
But
something
I said
could
we
do
ought to
that.
stay in a few albergues, etc. So anyway, so I think
Gotta taste the experience.
got to taste the experience. And so, we did it late in the season, so late October, early November. But that was a treat, and I would highly recommend, anybody at some point in their life, kind of do that with you if your kids are interested.
What would we talk about
do
for 2
that.
weeks? Just walking and talking.
It's amazing, everything in life. You talk through.
I'm just teasing. What would you talk about?
Oh, we talked about childhood and what we all of these different kind of things. I mean, and I mean obviously the basics. Well, that's the peak we got to get up, and where are we going to get water? What's the next meal? What have we got? All of the practical stuff. But you do talk about your life and
I love that.
and what's important, and certainly my son was what's he going to be doing when he finishes his MBA, etc. So
It's a really interesting style of like vacation and journey, basically. Yeah.
for me it was a vacation. I mean, for lots of people, the last part is you get to savor this later.
Mhm.
I honestly, there probably isn't a day that goes by that I don't kind of think about some part of what I did on that journey.
Oh, I love that.
And and so that and
So the bond is so
Yeah.
beautiful.
and when I
that you
talk with my
make.
son, and I let's say we remember that rainy day and the mud and God knows what.
I know my personal vacation style, once I got to a town I really liked, it would bug me so much to have to keep walking and move along. Like once I get to a place I like want to explore it so bad. Like when I went traveled through Europe last time, I stayed either 3 or 4 nights in each city, and even that window of time felt way too short.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
like next time I go back, I want to spend at least like 5 nights in each city,
Yeah.
because like 3 days wouldn't be enough for me.
Well, if you build in some flexibility, you can do that.
Mhm.
Now, most people don't book ahead. They just
Go
they-
spontaneous with it, kind of.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm on a Facebook group of the Primitivo.
Oh, so you do some social media.
Well, to look at what are the yes other
Just a tiny bit.
hikers, etc. And people would say, I'm at so and so, and the albergue is full up.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone got any ideas? That kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
And each town has a municipal albergue. Could be pretty small, and they're open 365 days a year. Then there are some others that are open, during the season. But still, if you were to travel in, June, July, and August,
You need to plan.
you got to be prepared that you might have to walk to the next place or go to another, etc. So as long as you
Bring
get
a
up to
tent.
October,
Can you
Yeah,
camp along
you
the
can-
way? If you have a little tent, you can.
yeah, you could
know.
just that's what you'd want to do.
See, now I would rather be in a tent than be in these hostels with a bunch of people.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
A tent, I'm good. A tent, I can do it all day long.
So
with a very blow-up mattress and
that's
all that
a
kind of
doing
stuff.
Carry
some,
all that
and some
stuff.
wine.
Don't forget.
doing something like that is over.
Unless you have a porter with you on your trip.
I'll have a
You
porter.
Is kind of overcoming those those personal challenges. And then interestingly, from a historical perspective, when you get to Compostela, and as a pilgrim, you get stamps in each of the places you stay. So when you get there, they authenticate your stamps and give you an official certificate,
Sure.
which is written
That's
in Latin
amazing.
and etc.
That's cool.
the
That's really
history
cool.
of this was a religious, still is for some people, a religious pilgrimage.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic, the religious part for many people is the fact that it's reputed that the bones of St. James are buried there. And when you go into the church, you can actually, go to the, essentially the crypt and see the crypt where, so this was, especially in the Middle Ages, relics were a huge thing.
Oh yeah.
And people would want to touch the bones of a saint.
A bone, whatever. Yeah.
Anything, and people wanted to collect them. Yeah, exactly. So, this is so basically.
Well, Kinga was a saint.
That's right.
Saint Kinga.
Ah.
Yes, I have a lot to live up to. And
Still is a saint.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
that's right. That's right.
So that's why Compostela is famous,
Yes.
and there are, I was just going to say maybe a last couple of things, and that's a cool part about history. So for example, whether you're religious or not, there are just lots of cool places to visit for the historical perspective.
Yeah.
So on my way back from doing this program just a month ago, I went to Rome.
Right, I remember.
And one of my favorite places to go in Rome is a place most people wouldn't go to. I actually have a friend that used to live there, and he's got 30 places you got to go visit. So I'll just mention a couple.
Wow.
No, we're not in a hurry. We have like another
3 minutes.
3, but we're going to take it that.
We're not going to cut that out. It's
Okay,
funny.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so we only have 3 minutes.
So we have
left.
3 minutes, because I do want to hear about Switzerland.
Okay.
Okay.
So one place that my son and I have visited is a place called Trefontaine. It's Abbé Trefontaine, and it is outside the walls of Rome, and it is supposedly where St. Paul was beheaded, and the story is that his head bounced 3 times and fountains sprung up, so that's why they call it 3 fountains.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interestingly, and so my son,
So the history is very interesting.
who's not, he's actually more interested in beer. So basically, there is a Trappist brewery there,
Yeah.
and so I went there to get a few bottles of beer
Oh, nice.
at the shop right at the Abbey, and I said to the guy, I said, the lady, I said, look, these 2 for my wife. I'd love a cold one right now. Could I do that? I'll eat it. I'll drink it outside. She said, oh yeah. So I sat, and it has an amazingly serene feeling. There's all these canopy of eucalyptus. They actually have a eucalyptus
beautiful.
beer,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Interesting.
which I didn't care for.
Oh, okay.
So, but anyway, it's,
I don't know.
so I had a beer there. I'm just a little outside, kind of the Abbey area. It has got a very serene feeling. But now, whether you believe the story or not, the point is lots of people have believed that is where, St. Paul
Yeah.
was beheaded. The other place that I find very cool is, it's called the Milvian Bridge, and it's in the northern part of the city. And what event happened there was that there was at the time, 312 AD, there was, the Roman Empire had 4 emperors. And one of them was Constantine, who later became Constantine the Great.
Right.
And he basically had a battle with Maxentius. And the story goes, this is at the Milvian Bridge, the story goes, he had Emperor Constantine had a dream. And the dream was, if you put crosses on your soldiers' shields, you will win this battle. And the Latin phrase is, in hoc signo vinces. By this sign, conquer. Apparently Constantine, well, he did, not apparently, he did win the battle, and he converted to Christianity.
Wow.
And that's,
And the rest is history.
That is incredible.
the rest is history. So when you walk across, there's no cars on the Milvian Bridge. So there's a moment of history. Now, whether there's
Very significant moment.
usually, so again, certainly that's the story. And the fact that he did convert, and there's evidence that he did do his.
So we'll have to go to part 3 and tell the rest of the story, because we only have less than a minute left.
Okay.
So you're going to be going to Switzerland.
Yeah. So
We'd love to hear about that trip when you come back.
Yeah. So I'm doing another long distance walk in and out of Lausanne.
Very cool.
Great.
Well, thanks for coming back in the green room with us.
Yeah.
and we look forward to having you back again soon.
Saving the planet.
One show at a time.
Thank
With
you. My
Graeme
pleasure.
Rankin.
And thank you, Richard. Thank you, Chip.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Finger.
Cheers. Ding dong, ding dong.
Oh.
Easy.